He was nobody in a town that forgot its own name. Factories coughed smoke over crooked roofs. Iron dust sat in the lungs like an unpaid debt. Jahangir Bekov woke up before the sirens, washed in cold water, and counted coins on a chipped plate beside his mother's medicine. The calendar on the wall was 2 months behind. Time, in poor places, moved when it could. At the gate of the metalworks, he traded jokes with men who joked to avoid drowning. Sparks grew stars from dead metal. He liked this part, the instant when fire made the useless useful, when the shape of a thing remembered what it wanted to be. By afternoon, the helicopters came. Dust rose, children chased it. Soldiers in black stepped out like punctuation and ended every sentence in the street. A captain read out 7 names. When he said Jahangir Bekov, neighbors looked at their feet. The captain did not say where or why. He only said, selected. Jahangir's mother folded her hands and whispered, the prayer of women who know that strength is the only charity the world reliably gives. Come back different, she said, but come back. He tried to smile as if leaving were easier than staying. He packed nothing. Poor people never do. He climbed the metal bird and watched the roofs shrink until they looked like the backs of coins. The mountain appeared at dusk. Blue stone, cut flat at the top, crowned with lights. The base was not on any map. Gates slid open without a sound. Inside, corridors like veins, humming with power, smelling of oil and snow. A steel plaque read, Shadow Division. The words did not brag, they warned. A woman in gray took his blood. A man with winter in his eyes took his history. Both seemed pleased he had so little of either. You'll be Falcon, the man said. You will see what others miss. Jahangir nodded, though he did not yet know what that meant. In the barracks, 20 bunks waited for 20 men, chosen from towns that forgot their names. A voice over the intercom gave them one instruction: sleep. Tomorrow, you'll learn to be invisible. Jahangir lay awake and listened to the wind pushing his face against the mountain. He thought of the calendar and the chipped plate. He practiced breathing like a soldier, deeper, slower, quieter. Somewhere below the floor, engines kept a hidden heart beating. Morning came like a blade.
Colonel Rayner addressed them on the parade square where the snow was stamped into glass. He was not large, but he carried the kind of silence that fills a room and rearranges men. You were selected, he said, because you can survive. You will remain because you can obey. His eyes rested on each face as if he were measuring the cost of using it. They ran until their legs remembered a better owner. They learned to fall without breaking, to break without leaving marks, to move through a hallway like smoke and through a forest like a rumor. The mountain became a teacher. Steep rock taught humility. Thin air taught patience. Nights bled into mornings. 5 would graduate, the instructors said. The rest would return to the world knowing what they could never say. Jahangir adapted. He listened more than he spoke. In the firing house, he hit center mass because center mass was honest. In hand-to-hand, he learned distance is a language and the body tells the truth. He could stand so still that snow forgot to fall on him. The others joked that he was born with muffled footsteps. They called him Falcon because, during a drone avoidance drill, he spotted a glint in the clouds and walked them out of sight before the alarm thought to ring. Rayner watched. Praise never crossed his face, but punishment crossed it easily. When a recruit, Sabir, froze on the cliff traverse, the colonel clipped in quietly, put Sabir's hand where it needed to be, and said, "You can keep your fear, you just can't let it drive." That was the only mercy they saw that week. At night, in the canteen where metal trays made small thunder, Jahangir read the room. Karim, the strongest, hit a limp. Dallaire, the fastest, hid letters from home. Marat, the loudest, hid a stutter that only returned when he dreamed. They were not the same kind of brave, but they were the only kind they would get. On the 30th day, they descended into a windowless classroom where a single word shone on a black screen: ethics. An instructor with a scar like a comma across his cheek said, "You will do things that must never be done. Your compass is classified. Your map is a rumor. Ask your conscience only one question. Will this save lives that matter?" He smiled without kindness, and learned quickly that matter has a rank. Jahangir stared at the word until it blurred. In places like his town, everything mattered and nothing did. Here, the difference had consequences. They parachuted into darkness for practice, swam through ice with ropes in their teeth, learned 8 ways to knock a man down and 9 ways to help him up without leaving a bruise. At graduation, 5 stood where 20 began. Jahangir, Karim, Dallaire, Marat, and Ishak. Rainer pinned a badge on each chest, a silver triangle with a black vein through it. "It isn't a medal," he said. "It's a key." A mission file waited under their dinner plates. The border was a rumor stitched from floodlights and fences. On the other side lay a warehouse where a small thing with a large consequence changed hands. A nuclear drive not meant to exist outside a vault. Satellites watched the clouds. Drones watched the dirt. Men watched one another. Night fell hard. Falcon Team moved in the seam between 2 camera arcs like a shadow deciding where to be. Jahangir's breath didn't steam, he kept it. They cut a fence with the patience of surgeons and slipped through stacked crates that smelled of rubber and salt. Somewhere above them, a generator coughed, steady as an old man climbing stairs. It should have been simple. Simple, in their world, still meant terrible. They ghosted 2 guards with sleep and silence, cracked a keypad with a glove that knew numbers, and opened a metal coffin where the stolen drive slept like a sin. Then the fire started. Not theirs. In a side corridor, someone screamed in a civilian language, and heat crawled along the ceiling like a fast tide. Jahangir turned his head. Smoke wrote its ugly poem. A door bucked. Behind it, a woman pounded with the weak fury of someone already losing. "Leave it," hissed Karim, dragging the metal case. "Clock's eating us." Jahangir stepped once, twice. Orders were gravity. He jumped anyway. He ripped the bar, caught the woman as she fell, covered her mouth so a cough wouldn't become a bullet. He carried her under the alarm's red rain while the team adjusted their plan around his mistake, and Rainer's voice in their earpieces became ice. They got out because practice had taught them 100 ways a plan could break, and left them one that didn't. In the exfil truck, the woman slept against the stolen drive like a child against a wolf. Jahangir wrapped her hands in gauze. The colonel's silence on the comms was worse than shouting. At base, the medal they didn't get was replaced by punishment he did. 1 week of gray. Guard posts where even shadows were inspected. Drills until breath quit arguing. Meals that tasted like the inside of a tin. Marat clapped him on the shoulder. "You're stupid," he said, smiling, "but the kind we might need." Rainer wrote 2 lines in a report and told no one what they said.
The war put on a suit for the diplomatic visit. Flags practiced their smiles. The mountain base softened its edges and polished its threats. Generals with polished teeth arrived to tour the cage and applaud the tigers. Cameras saw only what they were told to see. In the medical wing, a humanitarian team unpacked boxes stamped with symbols for hope. Among them was a woman with dark hair tied like a promise, and hands that knew where pain hid. She moved through wounded recruits as if sorrow were a room with good windows. Her badge read Amelia Ward. Her eyes read everything else. Jahangir met her when he returned to exchange bandages he didn't need, an excuse he thought he could keep. She smiled the kind that tilts a man's future. "You're the one who runs toward fire," she said, as if greeting an old story. "I'm the one who walks away from it and brings people with me." He tried to remember his rehearsed silence. It failed. They talked about nothing safely. The way mountain air makes you earn breath, the boring bravery of nurses, the price of boots. He learned she studied medicine, that her father believed in rules the way some men believe in weather, and that she volunteered in places the map forgot to color. She learned he spoke carefully so words wouldn't spend him. Drones watched everything at the base, but they had blind minutes the way every machine does. In those minutes, they met near the garden, a strip of stubborn green that refused to admit what kind of place this was. He told her about the factory when the night allowed it. She told him about sunlit halls and schools where windows opened. A moth died against the lamp and they fell silent, as if it had been a small announcement about the world. They did not plan to fall in love. Love planned them. Whispers found them first. Kareem teased him. Dollar warned him. Marat offered a joke too loud to be safe. Rainer said nothing, which meant he knew everything. Jahangir tried to hide his heart in work, but hearts are terrible employees. They show up where they shouldn't and ask for overtime. One evening, Amelia pressed a cool hand to the veins in his wrist and said, "I wish I could fix the whole world the way I can fix a single wound." He answered, "A single wound is sometimes the whole world." They did not kiss. The not kissing was louder than thunder. By weekend, a new mission file landed on his bunk. A red strip crossed it like a mouth that wouldn't open.
Rainer's office had no photographs. Men like him didn't collect memories. They collected outcomes. He slid the file across to Jahangir. "Target Othello," he said. Shadow Division's name for an internal traitor leaking operations to bidders with no flag. Direct action. Clean. His voice made clean sound like a sacrament. The pages were black where they mattered. The location was a private compound wired like a nervous system. The time window was mean. The final page contained a photograph clipped to the corner. The face in the picture was not a stranger. It was General Arthur Ward, Amelia's father. Jahangir kept his breath inside. The colonel watched him with a scientist's interest. "You're not the first soldier to fall in love," Rainer said softly, as if sparing a doomed animal. "You can be the first to keep your oath anyway." The room seemed smaller than its walls. He left without saluting. Outside, the mountain was brutally beautiful, a lesson in survival and disinterest. He found Amelia where he knew she'd be when her soul needed quiet. The garden, hands in dirt, saving small green lives. He told her the truth because lies break slower. Her face went through 3 weather systems: shock, refusal, and the final storm. "My father is many things, but he is not for sale." Jahangir's training said verify. His heart said listen. Night swallowed the mountain. Falcon Team moved with it. They cut fences they had cut in training 1,000 times. The compound's lights were rich and cruel. Inside, they ghosted hallways until the world flipped. Floodlights erupted, doors sealed, speakers spoke with a voice that wasn't a guard's. General Ward said from every wall, "My daughter is safe, you are not." Amelia had already warned Jahangir. They met in a service tunnel where air tasted like old coins. He set a trap. For you, for the colonel, for the machine that eats men. Her voice broke only once. They ran through a blueprint she had stolen with the nurse's key and a daughter's courage. The extraction that followed rewrote the definition of close. Falcon Team split, Kareem bled, Daler dragged him. Marat laughed because fear liked him less when he mocked it. Jahangir stood between 2 doors and chose the one where Amelia stood. He chose it again when the firing started. They didn't sleep that night. They didn't talk about future or past. They held one another the way a drowning man holds the air he finally finds. The camera in the ceiling stared at a blind wall. When dawn came, choices were uniforms. So did consequences. By noon, a new order went out across the base. Jahangir Bakaf, detain on sight. In the Shadow Division's ledger, Love had tipped a column.
A soldier knows the sound of boots meant for him. The mountain's arteries filled with teams that knew his steps into shortcuts. Men who could predict his breathing like weather. Falcon Team, his brothers, split 50 ways across the map to cut him small. The order wasn't cruel, it was clean. He moved as he'd been taught, but with a purpose the lessons never risked. Live long enough to break the story. In the forest below the base, fog rose in ropes. He met Kareem first. They didn't speak. Language would have cost them time and courage. It ended in a circle of trampled ferns and a decision neither wanted. Kareem's hands were better than his, but Jahangir's heart had changed shape. He used the terrain as a partner, gave ground to take balance, and laid Kareem down like a heavy truth. Sleep, he whispered, and left a beacon for medevac. He would not become the monster the orders needed. On the ridge, Daler came at dusk, fast as always. He juked left, right, disappeared behind a pine and reappeared behind Jahangir's thoughts. They traded throws like childhood rivals. Daler smiled while they fought. He always had. They say you fell, he panted. We all fall, Jahangir answered, and flipped him into a drift so gently that Snow applauded. He tied Daler to a root with paracord and tucked a heat pack into his jacket. Tell them I chose, he said. Tell them I'll finish this my way. The desert took him next, miles away, where a red sun painted everything with departure. Marat waited by an old radio tower that hummed with insects and regret. I should shoot you from here, Marat called, lifting a rifle and lowering it. But I'd rather know who wins. They fought with hands so the story would be honest. Marat's laugh cracked once when a joint locked. Fine, he wheezed, topping the sand. Make it count. By then, the country was a net, and he was a hole moving through it. He followed a breadcrumb trail of corruption Amelia helped map. Shell companies that sold loyalties by the crate. Contracts signed in rooms without clocks. Missions whose true objectives whispered names of men who owned the dark. Everywhere he looked, the Shadow Division's badge had a second shadow beneath it, the outline of money. At a rail yard, he found a container labeled as medical relief. Inside, weapons not even the manuals had names for. He filmed everything with a camera a friend should not have given him. He sent it to a journalist who had been waiting for a miracle or a martyr. He hoped to be the first, and feared becoming the second. The noose tightened. Reiner understood what Jahangir was doing because he would have done it the same way. The colonel moved pieces on a board that never admitted it was a game, driving him where he wanted the end to happen. Back to the mountain where men were made into tools and then into legends or graves. Jahangir climbed. Snow began again. The sky's way of covering evidence.
The bunker sat under the parade square, like a thought a man keeps under his tongue. Its door used a code the mountain taught only to those it trusted. Jahangir entered on the third try, because memory and fear share a drawer. Inside, the power hummed with the confidence of secrets. Banks of machines blinked polite lights. Paper files lived in metal drawers with numbers instead of names. He opened one and found proof that felt like a weather change. Payments in the 8 figures passed as infrastructure to shell foundations. Training missions booked as disaster drills that never allowed reporters. A ledger titled Civilian Collateral that read like a prayer list said too late. He plugged in a drive and fed the world. Encrypted, mirrored, redundantly stubborn, the files fled down a dozen tunnels Amelia had prepared with the quiet speed of the brave. She was at a safe terminal, miles away, guiding packets like a nurse guides a wounded man down a corridor. It's working, she said over the line, voice wrapped in static and faith. The door blew inward, air punched. Men in black spilled like ink. Jahangir moved through them with the clean economy of a carpenter who knows his tools. He refused to kill. He broke what he had to, and nothing else. A round clipped his arm. He treated it with a strip of shirt and a small lie to his own pain. They dragged him down after he'd done enough. The uploads confirmed, the mirror sites awake, the journalist's phone lighting a new kind of fire. As they cuffed him, he saw Raynor step through the smoke. The colonel looked at the screens, then at Jahangir, and something almost like pride flickered and died. You could have been a legend. You might become one anyway. But you won't like the statue. Truth doesn't need statues, Jahangir answered, blood wet on his sleeve. It needs witnesses. In a corridor above, alarms changed pitch, the sound of an institution realizing it had been seen.
They brought him to the roof because there are some conversations only the sky deserves to hear. Snow came sideways, as if the wind had an opinion. Helicopters circled like thoughts too loud to ignore. Raynor dismissed the squad with a nod. He and Jahangir stood 10 paces apart, the way men do when words and history must share the same breath. You broke the code, the colonel said. I kept it, Jahangir answered. The one we wrote before we had badges. Raynor's hands were empty, then not. The knife he chose came from a time before satellites, when endings were personal. Let's leave the lawyers out of it. They fought without flourish. Training met purpose on a floor of ice. Raynor was as good as rumor, better than memory. Jahangir was the student who finally asked the right question with his body. He gave ground when the wind demanded it, took it when doubt made a mistake in the colonel's eyes. They moved to the edge where the world dropped away into white. Why her? Raynor asked in the middle of a lock, as if love were the real charge. Jahangir didn't answer. He shifted weight, stole balance, turned the knife into a confession neither wanted, and sent it clattering across the roof. The colonel went to one knee. He did not look surprised. He looked relieved, as if a long duty had finally told him what it cost. Sirens below modulated into a different song, one that sounded like accountability. A helicopter peeled off and hovered near the roof. Loudspeakers declared things the mountain had never heard. Warrants, oversight, names. Raynor stood with effort. He said, "You've changed nothing." Not like a threat, but like a weather report a tired man delivers out of habit. I changed me, Jahangir said, breath smoking. And I changed the lie. For a long second, neither moved. Then the colonel did something no one expected. He stepped back, put his hands behind his head, and faced the sky. When the squad returned, they found two men who had just ended a war neither could win. The trials came slowly, like winter thaw. The documents Amelia and Jahangir released bloomed into subpoenas. Some men resigned before questions learned their names. Some were arrested. Some wrote books about how they were misunderstood. The Shadow Division survived because nations keep the tools they can't admit they use. But it survived changed, with eyes watching it that did not blink. Amelia and Jahangir met in a small courthouse yard where trees pretended the world was normal. She pressed his palm against her cheek. She said, "We kept one promise. We told the truth." He nodded. The future was not safe, but it was possible. They did not go back to the town with the broken calendar. They built another life in a place where mornings arrived on time and doors did not lock themselves. Sometimes at night, he woke to the whir of a helicopter that wasn't there and counted his breath until the sky grew patient again. He taught boxing to boys who needed rules that didn't hurt. She ran a clinic where the poor did not apologize. On their kitchen wall hung a small silver triangle with a black vein through it, the only thing they kept from the mountain. It reminded them that keys open cages, and cages, sometimes, open. When strangers asked how they met, they told a shorter story. When the wind rose from the north, he could still taste snow, metal, and the sharp edge of choices. He took his hand and the world grew quieter. Love was not the reason he disobeyed. Love was the reason he survived disobedience. In the end, the soldier's code was simple enough to say and hard enough to keep. Protect the defenseless, refuse the profitable lie, choose the person over the machine. He had broken their rules to keep his own. And when the past came howling, as it always does, he stood his ground, not as a ghost of the mountain, but as a man who had learned how to walk off it and keep his soul. Fade out. Slow strings. One heartbeat. Silence.